Give me the rifle." The words had not been spoken yet, but less than an hour from now they would echo across a rocky valley and change the way an entire SEAL team saw one woman forever. The morning sun hung low over the mountains of eastern Afghanistan, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain as a convoy prepared to move out from a temporary operations base. Engines hummed softly. Radios crackled with routine checks. Men moved with the calm efficiency that came from years of training together. Among them was Emma Walker. At 27 years old, she looked more like a logistics specialist than someone destined to become the center of a story that soldiers would tell for years. A tan backpack rested against her shoulders. Ammo cases weighed down her arms. Dust covered her boots before the mission had even started. Nobody paid much attention to her. That was normal. Emma preferred it that way. She moved between vehicles, helping load supplies, checking equipment, and carrying extra ammunition for the sniper team assigned to overwatch the operation. The mission itself seemed straightforward. A reconnaissance patrol through a narrow valley. Nothing unusual. Nothing dramatic. At least that was what everyone believed. Ryan Mitchell sat on the tailgate of a transport vehicle, cleaning his rifle with practiced confidence. At 34, he was considered one of the most reliable snipers in the task force. Calm under pressure. Precise. Trusted. Younger operators often watched him work just to learn from his habits. Ryan glanced up as Emma approached carrying another ammunition case. "You know," he said with a grin, "you're making me look lazy carrying all my gear." A few nearby SEALs laughed. Emma set the case down carefully. "Someone has to keep you supplied," she replied. Ryan chuckled. "Fair enough. Just keep carrying ammo, and I'll handle the hard part." More laughter followed. The comment wasn't cruel. It was simply the way people saw her. She was support. Helpful. Dependable. Quiet. Nobody questioned it. Emma offered a small smile and continued working. She never felt the need to correct assumptions. Across the compound, Commander Jack Morrison studied a satellite map while discussing route options with team leaders. The operation window was tight. Weather conditions could change quickly in the mountains. Every minute mattered. Yet even as briefings continued, Jack found himself noticing Emma moving between positions. Efficient. Focused. Never wasting motion. He had seen that kind of discipline before, usually in experienced operators, not in someone assigned to carry supplies. Before he could think more about it, a radio operator called his name and pulled him back into mission planning. Within minutes, the convoy rolled out of the base. Tires crunched against gravel roads. Dust rose behind them like a long gray ribbon stretching into the distance. Emma sat quietly near the rear vehicle, watching the landscape pass by. Jagged ridgelines towered overhead. The valley ahead looked peaceful beneath the morning light. But appearances could be deceptive. Emma knew that better than anyone. As the convoy disappeared deeper into the mountains, none of the men around her realized they were heading toward a moment that would test every assumption they had ever made about the quiet woman carrying ammunition in the back of the convoy. The convoy wound deeper into the valley as the morning stretched toward noon. The mountains rose on both sides like giant stone walls, narrowing the route until the vehicles seemed small against the landscape. Dust drifted behind the tires and settled across the equipment stacked in the back. Most of the operators remained focused on their responsibilities. Some monitored radios. Others scanned the ridgelines through binoculars. Ryan Mitchell occupied the rear observation position, occasionally checking landmarks against the mission map. To everyone else, it looked like another routine patrol. Emma Walker sat quietly beside several ammunition cases, her eyes moving across the terrain with steady attention. She was not reading a map. She was reading the valley itself. The shadows beneath rocky ledges. The direction of the wind brushing across the slopes. The narrow choke points where visibility changed without warning. Years ago, those details had become second nature to her. Now she noticed them without thinking. One of the younger SEAL operators, Tyler Brooks, leaned back against a gear pack and looked toward her. "You always this quiet?" he asked. Emma smiled slightly. "Most of the time. You ever get bored carrying supplies?" Tyler continued. "Seems like you spend every mission hauling equipment for everyone else." Emma glanced out the vehicle window. "Some jobs matter more than people realize." Tyler laughed. "That sounds like something a commander would say." A few nearby operators chuckled before returning to their tasks. The conversation ended there, but Emma noticed Ryan looking in her direction. He had heard the exchange. For a moment, he seemed curious, as though he wanted to ask something else. Instead, he returned his attention to the terrain ahead. Nearly 40 minutes later, the convoy reached a temporary observation point overlooking a wide section of the valley. Commander Jack Morrison ordered a short halt to verify coordinates and review intelligence updates. Operators stepped out to stretch their legs and check equipment. The mountain air felt cooler at this elevation. Emma helped unload additional ammunition and water supplies while the team prepared observation positions. Ryan climbed toward a rocky overlook that provided a clear view of the surrounding terrain. Before leaving, he paused beside Emma. "You know," he said, adjusting the sling on his rifle, "I have worked with support personnel for years. Most people complain about carrying this much weight." Emma secured another supply case and shrugged. "Complaining never makes it lighter." Ryan laughed. "Fair point." He started walking away, then stopped. "Still, you handle yourself differently." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Differently how?" Ryan considered the question, like someone who is always paying attention. For the first time, Emma did not answer immediately. A faint breeze moved across the overlook. Somewhere above them, an eagle circled against the bright blue sky. Finally, she smiled. "Maybe I just like noticing things." Ryan nodded slowly and continued toward his position. As he disappeared among the rocks, Commander Morrison watched the exchange from a distance. The feeling he had earlier returned. There was something unusual about Emma Walker. Nothing obvious. Nothing dramatic. Just a quiet confidence that did not match the role everyone assumed she played. Yet the mission schedule left little time for questions. The team finished preparations and resumed movement through the valley. Ahead, the route curved between towering ridges that blocked the horizon from view. Emma looked toward the narrowing pass and felt an uneasy sensation she could not fully explain. Experience had taught her that the most important moments rarely announced themselves in advance. They arrived quietly, disguised as ordinary days, and by the time people recognized them, everything had already changed. The convoy continued through the narrowing pass as afternoon sunlight spilled across the upper ridges. What had once been a wide valley had become a corridor of stone and shadow. The mountains seemed closer now. Every turn concealed another stretch of terrain. Every ridge blocked another line of sight. Commander Jack Morrison ordered a slower pace. Vehicles adjusted their spacing while operators monitored the surrounding slopes with increased attention. Nobody said it out loud, but the atmosphere had changed. Even the casual conversations had faded. Emma Walker noticed it immediately. The valley felt different. Not dangerous in any obvious way, just unusually quiet. The kind of quiet that made experienced people pay attention. She sat near the rear of the convoy, her gaze moving from one ridgeline to another. Wind brushed loose dust across the rocks. Small pebbles occasionally rolled down distant slopes. Most people would have ignored details like that. Emma never did. Up ahead, Ryan Mitchell had already moved into an elevated observation position overlooking the route. Through his optics, he studied the terrain with professional patience. Every few minutes, he updated Commander Morrison through the radio. Nothing unusual. No visible movement. No immediate concerns. Yet Ryan found himself scanning the same sections repeatedly. Something about the valley refused to settle comfortably in his mind. Several hundred yards below, the convoy paused briefly. Near a dry riverbed, while navigation coordinates were confirmed. Operators stepped out to stretch and inspect equipment. Emma lifted another ammunition case and carried it toward a supply vehicle. Tyler Brooks watched her shake off the extra weight as though it barely mattered. "I still do not understand how you carry all that gear without complaining," he said. Emma secured the case and smiled. "You keep asking the same question. Because nobody has given me a good answer yet. Maybe I have had a lot of practice." Tyler laughed. "Doing what?" Emma looked toward the mountains. For a second, her expression became distant, paying attention to details. Before Tyler could ask another question, a radio transmission interrupted them. Commander Morrison was issuing updated movement instructions. The convoy immediately resumed its advance. As the vehicles rolled forward, Emma settled back into her position and studied the terrain once more. High above, Ryan adjusted his observation angle. A flash of reflected sunlight caught his eye from a distant ridge. It vanished almost immediately. He lowered his optics, then raised them again. Nothing, just rocks and sunlight. Still, he marked the location mentally. Experience had taught him not to dismiss small observations. Minutes later, the convoy entered the narrowest section of the valley. Towering rock walls rose hundreds of feet on both sides. The route curved gently ahead, disappearing behind an outcropping of stone. Visibility became limited. Movement slowed further. Inside the lead vehicle, Commander Morrison reviewed updated maps and checked his watch. The mission timeline remained on schedule. Everything appeared normal. Yet he could not shake the same feeling that had followed him since morning. Meanwhile, Emma stared toward the bend ahead. The uneasy sensation she felt earlier had returned stronger than before. She could not explain why. Nothing looked obviously wrong. No alarms sounded. No warnings appeared. The valley remained calm beneath the afternoon sky. But somewhere deep inside, instincts built through years of experience were whispering the same message. The ordinary part of the day was about to end. The first sign that something was wrong came from Ryan Mitchell. High above the convoy, he remained motionless behind his observation position, studying the distant ridgelines through his optics. For nearly 20 minutes, nothing had changed. Rocks, shadows, wind, the same landscape repeating itself mile after mile. Then he noticed it. A movement that lasted less than a second. A shape where no shape should have been. Ryan adjusted his view and focused on the area again. The movement was gone. Yet the uneasy feeling that had followed him all afternoon suddenly sharpened. He reached for his radio. "Commander, I am seeing something unusual on the eastern ridge. I cannot confirm what it is yet." Below, Jack Morrison immediately looked toward the mountains. "Copy that. Keep eyes on it." Around the convoy, conversations stopped. Operators instinctively shifted their attention toward the surrounding terrain. Nobody panicked. Years of training prevented that. But everyone understood that when Ryan reported uncertainty, it mattered. Emma Walker felt the change instantly. The atmosphere tightened. People moved with more purpose. Radios became more active. Drivers reduced speed even further. The entire convoy seemed to hold its breath. Ryan continued scanning the ridge. A few moments later, another brief movement appeared. Then another. This time he was certain he had seen it. "Commander, multiple indicators on the eastern side. Recommend increased caution." Jack acknowledged the warning and began issuing instructions. Vehicles adjusted positions. Observation sectors were reassigned. Operators spread their attention across key points along the valley walls. Emma listened quietly while helping secure additional equipment. To anyone watching, she appeared calm. Inside, however, old instincts were beginning to wake. The same instincts she had spent years trying to leave behind. The convoy rounded another bend and entered a wider section of the valley. For the first time all afternoon, the surrounding ridges opened enough to reveal miles of terrain ahead. Sunlight washed across the mountains. The view looked almost peaceful. Tyler Brooks stepped out briefly and shook his head. "You know, if somebody took a picture of this place, nobody would believe how beautiful it is." Emma looked toward the horizon. "The most beautiful places are often the hardest to understand." Tyler laughed softly. "You always answer like you are hiding a secret." Before Emma could respond, Ryan's voice returned over the radio. This time it carried a different tone. Sharper. Focused. Every operator recognized it immediately. "Commander, I have visual confirmation of unusual activity. Multiple positions. No immediate threat observed, but something is definitely happening up here." Jack's expression hardened. "Understood. Everybody stay alert." Silence settled over the convoy. Even the wind seemed quieter. Emma slowly lifted her eyes toward Ryan's distant position on the ridge. A strange feeling settled in her chest. Not fear. Not anxiety. Recognition. The kind that came when experience whispered a warning before facts could explain it. Minutes passed. Then suddenly Ryan stopped speaking. His radio transmission ended mid-sentence. Operators exchanged confused looks. Jack immediately reached for his microphone. "Ryan, report." No response. "Ryan, this is Morrison. Report your status." The radio remained silent. High above the convoy, Ryan's observation position stood against the afternoon sky, motionless. Every eye turned toward the ridge. And for the first time that day, Emma Walker stepped forward before anyone else moved. Emma Walker was already moving before Commander Jack Morrison finished calling Ryan's name a third time. While the rest of the convoy remained frozen by uncertainty, she had locked her eyes on the distant observation point. Something was wrong. Not because the radio had gone silent. Radios failed. Batteries died. Equipment malfunctioned. What troubled her was Ryan Mitchell himself. During the entire mission, he had maintained constant communication. For a man that disciplined to disappear without explanation meant something had changed. "I am going up there," Emma said. Several operators turned toward her. Tyler Brooks blinked in surprise. "What?" Emma pointed toward the ridge. "Ryan needs someone to check his position." Commander Morrison immediately began assigning a small team to investigate. Within moments, 2 operators started preparing to move. Emma stepped forward again. "I know the fastest route." Morrison looked at her. "How?" The question hung in the air. Emma glanced toward the terrain. "Because I have been studying the ridge line since we entered the valley." For a second, nobody responded. Then Morrison gave a short nod. "Fine. You go with them." Minutes later, Emma climbed the rocky slope alongside the investigation team. The route was steep, covered with loose stone and narrow ledges. The operators around her struggled to maintain pace. Emma did not. She moved efficiently, conserving energy, choosing footholds before she reached them. More than once, the others found themselves following her lead. Halfway up the ridge, Tyler looked over. "You have done this before." Emma kept climbing. "I have walked a lot of hills." Tyler laughed despite the tension. "That is not what I meant." Emma offered no further explanation. 20 minutes later, they reached Ryan's position. The moment they arrived, relief spread through the team. Ryan was conscious and alert. A damaged radio unit rested beside him. Whatever had happened, the equipment was no longer functioning. Commander Morrison's voice soon returned through a backup communication line. The convoy relaxed slightly after learning Ryan was safe. Yet a new problem emerged almost immediately. Ryan examined his primary rifle system and frowned. "The optic assembly took damage when the radio equipment failed," he said. "I can still observe, but I cannot trust the calibration until it is properly checked." The words landed heavily. Ryan was the team's eyes across the valley. If he could not fully trust his equipment, everyone became more vulnerable to uncertainty. Commander Morrison requested a status assessment. Ryan studied the rifle again. "I need time to verify everything." The answer was honest, but it created a difficult situation. Time was exactly what the mission did not have. Emma remained quiet while the discussion continued. She stood near the edge of the overlook, watching the distant ridges through the afternoon light. Wind crossed the valley from west to east. Shadows had begun shifting across the slopes. Every detail registered automatically in her mind. Then Ryan noticed something. Emma was not looking around aimlessly. She was measuring distances with her eyes, tracking wind movement, reading terrain, the same way experienced marksmen often did. Ryan lowered his rifle slowly. For the first time all day, he looked at Emma Walker not as someone carrying ammunition, but as someone who understood far more than she had ever revealed. Ryan Mitchell continued watching Emma from the overlook long after the others returned their attention to the mission. The afternoon sun had begun its slow descent, casting golden light across the valley. Below them, the convoy remained in position while Commander Jack Morrison coordinated updates and reviewed options. The delay was creating pressure. The team needed reliable long-range observation before continuing deeper into the region. Yet Ryan still could not fully verify his damaged optic system. He adjusted several controls and checked alignment points again. The results remained inconsistent. Not enough to create panic. More than enough to create doubt. And in his profession, doubt was dangerous. Emma stood several yards away studying the terrain. She was not pretending to understand it. She genuinely did. Ryan could see it now. Every few moments her eyes shifted between landmarks. Ridge, saddle, rock formation, tree line, wind pattern. She was processing information exactly the way experienced marksmen often did. Finally, Ryan stood and walked toward her. "What do you see?" he asked. Emma did not look surprised by the question. "Crosswind from the west," she replied calmly. "Stronger near the upper ridge than down here." Ryan remained silent. "Anything else?" Emma pointed toward a distant slope. "The sunlight is creating false depth perception over there. It makes the ridge appear farther away than it actually is." Ryan stared at her for several seconds. Most people would never notice something like that. Tyler Brooks happened to overhear part of the conversation. "How would you even know that?" he asked. Emma shrugged. "Observation." Tyler laughed. "That answer is getting old." Ryan did not laugh. Instead, he slowly removed his rifle from its resting position and held it in front of him. "Tell me the distance to that ridge." Emma looked once. No optics. No rangefinder. No equipment. Just her eyes. 920 yards. Maybe 930, depending on where you measure. Tyler blinked. Ryan said nothing. He already knew the exact answer. Emma had missed by less than 10 yards. The silence that followed felt different from any previous moment in the mission. For the first time, people were no longer seeing the quiet woman who carried ammunition. They were seeing a question they could not answer. Commander Morrison eventually approached after noticing the unusual gathering. What is going on? Ryan looked toward him, then back toward Emma. Sir, I think we need to have a conversation. Morrison folded his arms. About what? Ryan handed the rifle toward Emma. Not because he intended to surrender responsibility. Not because he lacked confidence. Because he wanted confirmation. Nothing more. Take a look, he said. Several operators exchanged confused glances. Emma hesitated for only a moment before accepting the rifle. The instant her hands touched it, something changed. Her posture shifted. Small. Subtle. Almost impossible to notice. Yet every experienced operator present felt it immediately. It was the difference between someone holding a tool and someone holding something deeply familiar. Ryan saw it. Morrison saw it. Even Tyler saw it. Nobody spoke. Emma calmly raised the rifle, settled behind the optic, and looked across the valley. Then, without realizing it, Commander Jack Morrison took a slow breath as a realization began forming in the back of his mind. Emma Walker had been hiding far more than anyone had imagined. Emma Walker remained behind the rifle for several long seconds without saying a word. The overlook had grown unusually quiet. Even the wind seemed softer now. Around her, experienced operators watched with growing curiosity. Nobody understood exactly what they were seeing, but everyone felt it. Ryan Mitchell had spent years working alongside marksmen. He knew the difference between confidence and familiarity. What Emma displayed was neither. It was something deeper. She adjusted the optics slightly, then paused. Her eyes moved across the valley. Ridge. Saddle. Rock formation. Tree line. The sequence appeared effortless. Like reading words on a page she had memorized years ago. What do you see? Ryan finally asked. Emma continued observing. The optic is not completely off. Ryan frowned. How can you tell? Because the error shifts when the angle changes. It is not a calibration problem. It is a mounting issue. Several operators exchanged looks. Ryan slowly blinked. That was exactly the conclusion he had reached after nearly 20 minutes of inspection. Yet Emma had identified it in less than a minute. Commander Morrison stepped closer. You are telling me you figured that out already? Emma lowered the rifle slightly. The pattern gives it away. Nobody laughed. Nobody questioned her. The confidence in her voice left no room for either. Ryan knelt beside her. Show me. Emma handed the rifle back and pointed toward a small section near the optic assembly. Ryan examined it carefully. After several seconds, he found what she had noticed. A minor alignment issue. Easy to miss. Easy to dismiss. Yet significant enough to affect precision. Ryan looked up slowly. You were right. Tyler Brooks stared in disbelief. How? Emma shrugged. Luck. Tyler immediately shook his head. No chance. For the first time all afternoon, a faint smile appeared on Ryan's face. Definitely not luck. Commander Morrison studied Emma carefully. The pieces were beginning to form a picture. Every unusual observation from the mission. Every strange answer. Every moment, she had quietly demonstrated knowledge beyond her assigned role. Yet one question remained. Why would someone with this level of expertise spend months carrying ammunition and working support assignments? Before he could ask, a new radio update arrived from the convoy below. Route planners needed immediate guidance about the safest path forward through the valley. Visibility concerns remained unresolved. Morrison acknowledged the transmission and looked toward Ryan. Can you verify the route? Ryan hesitated. The optic issue could be corrected, but it would take additional time. Time they did not want to lose. Then something unexpected happened. Ryan stood and offered the rifle toward Emma once again. This time there was no test behind the gesture. No curiosity. No challenge. Take a look at the route options, he said. Tyler nearly laughed from shock. You are serious? Ryan never looked away from Emma. Completely. Emma accepted the rifle and settled behind the optic again. The movement was smooth. Natural. Familiar. Minutes passed while she studied the valley. Nobody interrupted. Finally, she lowered the rifle and pointed toward a narrow corridor between two distant ridges. That route. Commander Morrison followed her gesture. Why? Emma answered immediately. Better visibility. Fewer blind approaches. More escape options if conditions change. Ryan stared at the terrain through his own binoculars. Slowly, he nodded. Then he lowered them and looked toward Morrison. Sir, she is right. Silence spread across the overlook. The recommendation had come from Emma Walker. The confirmation had come from the team's most trusted sniper. And for the first time since the mission began, nobody was looking at her as support personnel. They were looking at her as an expert. The convoy resumed movement using the route Emma had identified. What surprised everyone was not that Commander Morrison accepted her recommendation. It was how quickly he accepted it. Normally, route decisions involved discussion, verification, and multiple layers of review. This time, after Ryan Mitchell confirmed her assessment, Morrison issued the order without hesitation. The operators followed instructions and continued deeper into the valley. Yet the atmosphere had changed completely. Conversations that once treated Emma as little more than support personnel had disappeared. Nobody mocked her. Nobody questioned her. Instead, they watched. Quietly. Carefully. Trying to understand who she really was. As the convoy moved forward, Tyler Brooks eventually found himself riding beside Ryan. He leaned closer and lowered his voice. Tell me I am not the only one thinking this. Ryan kept his eyes on the terrain ahead. Thinking what? That Emma is not who she says she is. Ryan smiled slightly. I do not think Emma has lied about anything. You know what I mean. Ryan did. The answer simply took longer to form. Hours earlier, he would have described Emma as a dependable support specialist. Now that description felt incomplete. She had identified an optic issue faster than he had. Estimated distances with near-perfect accuracy. Read terrain like someone who had spent years studying it professionally. Most importantly, she never acted impressed by her own abilities. Truly skilled people often behave that way. Meanwhile, Commander Morrison sat inside the lead vehicle reviewing personnel records through a secure tablet. He was not searching for problems. He was searching for answers. Emma Walker's file appeared ordinary at first glance. Logistics assignments. Support certifications. Strong evaluations. Excellent physical conditioning scores. Nothing remarkable. Yet the deeper he looked, the stranger the pattern became. Several portions of her history were heavily restricted. Not classified in a dramatic way. Just inaccessible. That alone captured his attention. Most support personnel did not have sections of their service records locked behind additional authorization levels. Morrison continued reading. Then he stopped. One date caught his eye. 5 years earlier. A transfer request. Voluntary reassignment. No explanation included. No detailed notes. Only approval signatures. The timing matched something he vaguely remembered from years ago. A report. A briefing. A name. But the memory remained frustratingly incomplete. Ahead, Emma sat alone near the rear vehicle. She seemed completely unaware of the attention surrounding her. In reality, she noticed all of it. The glances. The whispers. The questions people were afraid to ask directly. She had experienced this before. The moment when people began connecting pieces of a puzzle they never realized existed. Her eyes drifted toward the mountains. The setting sun painted the ridges in shades of gold and orange. Beautiful. Quiet. Familiar. Memories surfaced without permission. A different valley. A different team. A different rifle. She remembered standing beside operators whose names still lived permanently in her thoughts. She remembered responsibilities she had spent years trying to leave behind. Most of all, she remembered the promise she made to herself after that chapter of her life ended. Never again. Never return to that role. Never become that person. Yet today, holding Ryan's rifle, something had awakened that she thought was gone forever. Behind her, Commander Morrison lowered the tablet slowly. At last the memory returned. A briefing from years ago. An elite marksman. Exceptional field evaluations. A sudden disappearance from operational assignments. Morrison looked toward Emma through the convoy window. Then he quietly spoke a name he had not heard in years. No way. Because if his memory was correct, Emma Walker had once been one of the most respected long-range specialists in the entire military. The convoy reached its destination just as the last light of day settled across the mountains. The mission concluded without incident, and for most of the operators, that should have been the end of the story. Equipment was unloaded. Reports were filed. Vehicles were secured for the night. Yet nobody seemed interested in discussing the mission itself. Every conversation eventually returned to the same subject. Emma Walker. Hours earlier, she had been the quiet woman carrying ammunition cases through the valley. Now even the most experienced operators were trying to understand who she really was. Commander Jack Morrison stood outside the operations tent reviewing final reports when he noticed Ryan Mitchell approaching. Ryan carried his rifle in one hand and a thoughtful expression on his face. "You found something, did you not?" Morrison asked. Ryan nodded. "I checked old records after we arrived." Morrison smiled faintly. "And?" Ryan stopped beside him. "You were right." For a moment, neither man spoke. They both knew exactly what that meant. Emma Walker had not exaggerated her experience. In fact, she had hidden most of it. Years earlier, she had built a reputation that very few people ever achieved. Her evaluations were exceptional. Her field performance was respected throughout multiple commands. Then, almost overnight, she had requested reassignment and disappeared from operational roles. No public explanation. No interviews. No recognition tour. She simply stepped away. Why would somebody walk away from that? Ryan asked quietly. Morrison looked toward the distant mountains. Sometimes the strongest people carry things nobody else can see. Later that evening, the team gathered for a brief mission review. Emma sat near the back of the room, exactly where she always did. She expected the discussion to focus on route planning and communications. Instead, Commander Morrison closed his folder and looked directly at her. The room fell silent. Emma immediately recognized what was happening. Morrison walked forward and placed a document on the table. "You spent the entire day pretending to be invisible." A few operators exchanged nervous smiles. Emma lowered her eyes. Morrison continued. "You carried supplies, helped the team, stayed quiet, never once mentioned your past." Ryan leaned back in his chair. Tyler Brooks stared openly now. Morrison glanced around the room before speaking again. "What matters is not who someone used to be. What matters is who they choose to be when nobody is watching." Then he looked directly at Emma. "Today you helped this team make better decisions. You shared your expertise without asking for recognition. That is leadership." The room remained completely silent. Emma seemed uncomfortable with the attention. That alone confirmed everything Morrison believed about her character. Finally, Ryan stood. Without a speech, without a joke, without any attempt to impress anyone. He simply walked across the room, carrying his rifle. When he reached Emma, he held it out toward her. "I think this belongs with someone who understands it better than I do." Soft laughter moved through the room. Emma shook her head immediately. "No." Ryan smiled. "That is exactly why you deserve the respect." For a moment, nobody moved. Then Tyler began clapping. Another operator joined him. Then another. Within seconds, the entire room was applauding. Not because Emma had demanded recognition. Not because she had revealed her history. But because she had earned their respect the hardest way possible. Through quiet competence. Through humility. Through action. Emma looked around the room and realized something important. For years, she had tried to leave her past behind. Yet the qualities that made her exceptional had never disappeared. They had simply been waiting for the right moment to return. And as the applause slowly faded, every person in that room learned the same lesson. Respect is never given because of appearances. Respect is earned because of character.